This is an emergency. Gaza. Visit muslimhands.org.uk or call us today. Every moment is precious.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين حمدا يوافي نعمه ويكافئ مزيدا يا ربنا لك الحمد كما ينبغي لجلال وجهك ولعظيم سلطانك سبحانك لا نحصي ثناء عليك أنت كما أثنيت على نفسك فلك الحمد حتى ترضى ولك الحمد إذا رضيت ولك الحمد بعد الرضا اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد في الأولين وصل وسلم على سيدنا محمد في الآخرين وصل وسلم على سيدنا محمد في كل وقت وحين وصلي وسلم على سيدنا محمد في الملأ الأعلى إلى يوم الدين وصلي وسلم على سيدنا محمد حتى ترث الأرض ومن عليها أنت خير الوارثين. Alhamdulillah, we praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and we ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and whoever keeps us inside the circles that link all the way back to the circle of the Supreme One himself sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. And the circles that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam reminded us that these are circles of paradise, as he said sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. One of the great imams of the Hadarim, Ali bin Muhammad al-Habishi radiallahu ta'ala anhu warda, he said, "Ma shaqni al-jannah," paradise, that it never enticed me, I never yearned for paradise, illa al-qawl al-muhibbu fiha, save that my beloved Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam is inside the paradise. And so paradise is not just jiwar Allah, it's not just a neighborhood of God, but it's a neighborhood of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. It's his protectorate. And if you're in the protectorate of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam, la yudurruka shay'an, and nothing at all can bring harm unto you. And so alhamdulillah, that we're in one of his riyadh sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, one of the riyadh of Allah ta'ala, his meadows, his circles of knowledge. إِذَا مَرَرْتُمْ بِرِيَاضِ الْجَنَّةِ فَارْتَعُوا لَهُ. You pass by the meadows of paradise, then graze therein. وَمَنْ رِيَاضُ الْجَنَّةِ يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ. What are the meadows of paradise, O Messenger of Allah? حِلَقَ الذِّكْر, the circles of the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and of its meanings, حِلَقَ الْعِلْم. And we pray that this, inshallah ta'ala, it's a gathering of not just ilm, knowledge, mujarrad, but likewise it's a gathering of dhikr, of the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The type of dhikr, as Abu Talib al-Makki would allude to, qutul qulub, the type of dhikr that brings sustenance to the heart, that brings life to the heart in and of itself, that cleanses the heart of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the dhikr saqala lil qulub, the dhikr is the cleanser of the heart, the polisher of the heart, the remover of all of the stains, the ran, that are deposited upon our hearts, especially in the age in which we live in, and in environments in which we live in, an age of tribulation and environments of tribulations. But alhamdulillah, that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, when he comes unto us, and the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam gives us a makhraj, as in the hadith of Sayyidina Ali bin Abi Talib, a makhraj, a way out, and a way that we can secure ourselves from perdition, a way that we can protect ourselves from destruction. And here, the issue of perdition and destruction is not worldly, it's not inside of this world, because this world shall come to an end. But the issue of destruction and perdition relates to the world to come. And when Sayyidina Ali bin Abi Talib karamallahu wajhu asked the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, "Mal makhraj yawma idhin?" On that day, the day of perdition, the day of tribulations, what is the way out? And the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he said, Kitab Allah, the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's that book where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Ma faratna fil kitabi min shay," that we've not abandoned anything inside of the book. It's that book that Allah Ta'ala says, Tibyanan li kulli shay. It's a clarification for everything and for anything. That's Kitab of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Abbas, Habr al-Ummah, the great erudite one of this nation, Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Abbas, Ibn Abdul Muttalib radiallahu ta'ala anhu warda, he said, were I to lose the halter of my camel, the strap of my camel, I could find it inside of the Quran. He would say radiallahu ta'ala anhu warda. That's somebody whose heart is attached to the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's somebody whose heart is attached to the heart of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. That is somebody who did not just the blood, but the very saliva of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam runs through the veins of Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhu warda. And we have to become of those people who find protection inside of the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And a part of becoming people of dhikr is to become the elite of Allah Jalla fil Ula. And we must have an objective in life. And who is it that you want to be in life? And we have to have objectives inside of life. And from the objectives in life is proximity to Allah Ta'ala. To be inside of His jiwar. From objectives in life is to be proximate to the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. In Ahlul Quran, Ahlullah wa Khasatu, Kalam al-Mustafa Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Yani the people of the Quran, they are Ahlullah. The people of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala wa Khasatu. And they're the elect, the elite of Allah Jalla fil Ula. And so the book of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala is important. Because the age needs a shield. We need that which can shield us from the difficulties of the age and the difficulties that are approaching us in the age that approaches. And that shield is the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Messenger of God sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Hakada with our topic, the topic of the Antichrist. And the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is going to inform us how to shield ourselves from ayatu rabbika, ba'du ayati rabbika, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says. That the day that comes, that you will see some of the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala manifest. That لا ينفع, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لا ينفع نفسا إيمانها. That the faith that you have will not benefit you one iota. Yani, who for? لم تكن آمنت من قبل. Save those people who prior to that day are people of deep and profound faith. People of ittisal, connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Kalam Allah. Yani, what does the verse mean? Sayyidina Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala anhu warda, he says in the Sunan of Tirmidhi, that day, لَمْ تَكُنْ آمِنَتْ مِنْ قَبْلِ, the day when your faith will be of no avail, will not benefit you one iota. ثَلَاثَ أُمُورٍ. He says in the authority of the Prophet sallallahu in the Sunan of Tirmidhi, 3 things. The Dajjal, the Antichrist, first and foremost. It's the first of them. And if somebody whose faith is not secured, in the day of the Antichrist, their faith will be stripped such that they will leave the world into a world of destruction. The nar of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The second he makes mention of, radiallahu anhu, is the Daba. The Daba, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the Daba, the beast that manifests upon the end of time. And that beast, in accordance to Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Amr, is the Jassasa, the beast of the Antichrist likewise. And the second, when the beast manifests, fully manifests, at the end of time, khalas, first and foremost in the Bawadi, inside the outback, and then thereby at Safa, right there at Mecca, in Hajj season, that beast, when he manifests, if you do not have faith at that point, prior to that point, your faith at that point will not benefit one iota. And then likewise, tulu al-shams min maghribiha. Likewise, the rising of the sun min maghribiha. From the westerly direction, the Prophet ﷺ said, planetary retrogression. When that occurs, khalas, if you do not have faith prior to it, khalas, intihal amal. And what's the meaning of that as we try to sort of connect a meaning that the Prophet ﷺ came with? You know, the first meanings we connected to the time in which we're in. This holy month, the month of Rajab in and of itself, Rajab al-Asam. And this is the month of Tawbah, the return back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's what the Prophet here is alluding to inside of the hadith in the Sunan of Tirmidhi. That the manifestation of the Antichrist, if you've not returned back to Allah ta'ala, repented to Allah ta'ala, prior to that, when he comes, khalas, the door is sealed. When the beast of the Antichrist manifests, khalas, door is sealed. No tawbah. There's no tawbah in that day. When you see the sun rise from the westerly direction for 3 days, no tawbah, intal amal. It's finished at that point in time. And then thereafter, taqum as-sa'a. You'll see that the hour will manifest ala ash-sharr lin-nas. The Prophet said of the most wicked, wretched of people will manifest. And so these are moments we seek. And we seize these moments in which we're in, these blessed months where the gateways of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are flung open, such that we can return back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because our affair, the affair of dhikr, the affair of the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as we try to anchor this in some type of benefit, because we can all speak about the Antichrist till kingdom come, but how does that benefit us with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Yeah, many of us can sit and we can regurgitate that which we've learned about the Antichrist. Kayfa istafadta, how you benefited from your knowledge of the Antichrist. If knowledge, the nature of knowledge, does not increase you in proximity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, does not increase the likelihood of your protection from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then that knowledge is a proof against you upon the day of judgment. And we don't seek proofs against. You see, we want to be vendors of our soul to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as the Prophet said, Al-Quran, hujjatan laka aw alayk. That the Quran is a proof either for you or is a proof against you. And every single one awakens upon each and every single day, like the day in which we're in. He said, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, bā'i'u nafsa, and he's a vendor of his soul. He either liberates it or he incarcerates it. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, is your soul being liberated? You see, because as we move towards the age, and we move radically towards the age, then the age is just about beings of spirit. And the beings who are spiritually grounded. This is a fitan. The Prophet ﷺ, a fitan, and the nature of fitna in the language of the Arabs, it relates to nar. It relates to fire. That it will scorch human beings, such that very few will survive it. In the tradition of the Rasul in Nu'aym ibn Hamad, that there are going to be 12,000 men and 7,800 or 7,700 women who meet the Antichrist, that they engage the age. And from the army of the Mahdi, from the people around the Mahdi, that's all. And 19, that's all, 19,000 who are going to engage the age, and they survive the age. That's it. So the age is going to scorch everybody else in their balayeen, in their millions, going to be scorched. Fitan. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ, in the hadith in Sahih Muslim of Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Abbas, the erudite one, Sahib al-Quran, radiallahu ta'ala anhu warda, he said that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam used to teach us a prayer. And he would teach us that prayer in the same way he would teach us a surah from the Quran, the hadith in Sahih Muslim. What is the prayer? Allahumma, oh Allah, I take refuge in you from what the tribulations of hell. Yani from adhabu jahannam, the chastisement, the punishment, the tribulation of hell. وَمِنْ عَذَابِ الْقَبْرِ, and from the tribulations and the punishments of the grave, I take refuge in you. And from fitnatul masih ad-dajjal, and from the tribulation of the Antichrist. وَمِنْ fitnatul mahya'i wal-mamat, and from the tribulation of life and death. That's the hadith of the Rasul, the hadith of Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha wa ardaha, that the Prophet ﷺ, this is a prayer he said in each and every single prayer. In each and every single prayer. Look at Imam Muslim ibn al-Hajjaj radiallahu anhu wa ardaha. When he said the hadith, when he relates the hadith, said, Imam Muslim, of those who believe that he's the greatest Imam of hadith, especially Imams of the Western lands, the lands in which we reside, those Imams of Ahl al-Islam, of the Western sphere of Islam, they believe the supreme Imam and the supreme work of hadith of the Rasul was the work of Imam Muslim ibn al-Hajjaj radiallahu anhu wa ardaha. Muslim ibn al-Hajjaj radiallahu anhu wa ardaha, he speaks about the student of Abdullah bin Abbas in the Senate. He's Imam al-Tawus radiallahu anhu wa ardaha. And he said Imam al-Tawus watched his son pray. Allahu Akbar, watched his son pray. And then when his son finished prayer, Sayyidina Tawus asked his son, did you say the dua of the Rasul about seeking refuge from the Antichrist in your prayer? And he said, La ya abati, no my father. He said, Ud salataka, repeat your prayer. And your prayer is not valid with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In the school that we stood, the school Imam al-Shafi'i, Imams of the Shafi'i school believe wajib to say that prayer inside of your prayer. The prayer of the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. It's the fitna of the Antichrist in and of itself. Asharrul fitna yuntadhar, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said. It's the most wicked reality that has ever awaited man. There's not been a single sin, the Prophet ﷺ said, that has occurred since the moment that Cain killed Abel, save that it's prepared the way for the manifestation of the Antichrist. The Prophet ﷺ said. In the hadith of Nu'man ibn Hamad, the Prophet ﷺ said, this is the supreme fitna, the greatest fitna that has ever occurred since the creation of Sayyidina Adam alayhi salam up until the end of time. The Antichrist. And so how is it that we can be people of ghafla, people of heedlessness? And our heedlessness is but a sign of his manifestation. As the Prophet ﷺ said, لا يأتي الدجال إلا على غفلة من الناس. That the Antichrist will not manifest save when people are in a state of heedlessness. على غفلة من الناس. The Prophet ﷺ said. The Prophet ﷺ said the Antichrist will not manifest حتى ينسى, until he is forgotten على المنبر, upon the minbar. When last did you go to a khutbah al-Jum'ah and you hear the Khatib himself speak about the Antichrist and the fitna of the Antichrist? And why is it that we have to gather here to hear about the Antichrist? That is something the Imams like Ibn Majah radiallahu ta'ala anhu warda, he relates on the authority of al-Muharibi. He said that it's wajib upon every teacher to teach the tradition of the Antichrist inside of elementary school, the kutab, to a 7-year-old kid. He said radiallahu anhu warda. The Imam al-Safarini radiallahu ta'ala anhu warda, he says it's wajib that the traditions of the Antichrist be taught to every children, every woman and every man. That it must be taught in each and every single school. You see, because the age approaches of deep and profound tribulations. Just like we see in our age, Imams of centuries ago, they're talking about fitna in their times. And they didn't see nothing compared to what we see. And that which we become accustomed to desensitized to. Yeah, it must be taught in each and every school. You see, because the days, the ma'alim, he says, when the nature of the way of the Prophet ﷺ is declared as being bid'ah. That's what he said, the Imam, radiallahu anhu warda. That when you see the people of the Sunnah are being accused of being people of bid'ah, it's from the great signs of the Antichrist himself. And then you see the way of bid'ah, that becomes the way of people of this religion. And that the deen becomes a way of ibtida', letiba'. It becomes a way of innovation, not a way of adherence to the way of the Prophet ﷺ. And so these are fitan. But the grandness of the fitan, of the tribulation of the Antichrist, it relates to how we fared in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It relates to the fact that this is a being who will strip you of your faith. Strip you of your faith. Save if you're from Ibadullah al-Mukhlasin. You're from the slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who not that you're people of ikhlas, mukhlis lillah, that you're struggling for sincerity, but you're mukhlas. Your sincerity has been stamped with approval by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, such that you're from the people of Siddiq. Sadaqu ma'ahadallahu alayh. Those who now have been truthful to the covenant that they've taken with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I mean, there's people who went before us who fared well with the Antichrist. But the Antichrist is not to come. The Antichrist, long time he's already arrived. And you see the manifestation of the Antichrist even in the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And from the manifestation of the Antichrist, because the Antichrist is a spiritual being. And the reality of him is bewildering. It's a spiritual reality, the Antichrist, in and of himself. And that spiritual reality, yet a jasad. What do you mean yet a jasad? It takes flesh and blood. There are those of the Imams radiallahu ta'ala anhum wardahum who believe the Antichrist was demon, shaitan. Sarrahu, Imams of the Salaf, sarrahu. Explicitly said that he's a demon. He's not from Banu, he's not from the inside. From those who says he's a sheikh. A sheikh means that he's half human, half demon. That his mother is a demon. The position of Ahl al-Islam, huwa al-insan. He's a human being. Hadith of Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. That he's a human being. Save that he has control over jinn, demons, and he has controls over these sheikh. Those people who are half man, half demons. And he has control over those who are demons in human form. As the Prophet ﷺ said, shayateen, demons, fi jufmani ins. In what? In the human form, the Prophet ﷺ said. Of the manifestation of the Antichrist, real manifestation of the Antichrist inside of the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Qawm Musa. In the age of the Prophet Musa ibn Imran alayhi salam. That's in the Quran. And mentioned in the Quran, Samiri. Inside of the Quran, Samiri. Ma khatbuka ya Samiri. What is it that you have to say, O Samiri? And who is Samiri? And a difference of opinion about where his origin lies, Samiri in and of himself. But there's one thing that we understand is that the colonization of the reality of Samiri, the colonization on behalf of the Antichrist. What is that? As the Antichrist takes control of the actual being of Samiri in and of himself in order to perform his own bid. What is that? Wadallah, yeah, dull. Samiri, he caused the children of Banu Israel to go astray. And when Sayyidina Musa ibn Imran returns back from standing in the presence of God upon Mount Tur, and he finds that Banu Israel are now worshipping, and they're worshipping the quote-unquote golden calf. And Sayyidina Harun alayhi salam points to Samiri, that he's the one who sent them astray. And then Musa ibn Imran approaches Samiri, ma khatbuka. What is that you have to say about this reality? And then Samiri now speaks about the world of the unseen, the world of spirit, But he says, قَبَضْتُ قَبْضَةً مِنْ أَثَرِ الرَّسُولِ, that I seize part of the traces of the Rasul himself, okay, of the messenger himself, the Rasul himself. Yani, who is the Rasul? And who's the Rasul he's speaking about? Yani, of traditional tafasir, the Rasul is Gabriel alayhi salam. That ceremony now, yani basurtu ma lam yubsiru, I saw that which they did not see. That's what somebody says to Moses inside the Surah Al-Taha. Who did he see? Riwayat? Gabriel. That's how it's traditionally understood. He sees Gabriel upon horseback. And when he sees the hooves of Gabriel lift, that ceremony now takes hold of the date beneath the hooves of the Archangel Gabriel. Okay? And then he takes that date and then he blows it into the actual golden calf. So well at nafsi. That's what I felt like doing. That's the conclusion I came to. And such that the golden calf now begins to scream, comes alive. And Banu Israel fall prostrate to the golden calf. That their ceremony, the Rasul, who is the Rasul? Is it Gabriel or is it just Gabriel? Or is the Rasul also the Antichrist? And that's why, again, transmission Senate, this is not opinionated. From our teachers, that's manifestation number one we can see. Of the Antichrist himself, whose whom? Ceremony. And that his form has been colonized, his spirit has been colonized by the Antichrist abstract, such that it manifests through him. This is an issue of transmutation. You know, we know about Jibreel, alayhi salam, Gabriel, supreme transmutation. The nature of angels, by definition, they have the ability for transmutation. And they transmute into the likes of you and I. And Gabriel, the most common known form is the form of whom? Dajjal al-Kalbi, alayhi salam, in the time of the Rasul. He colonizes the form of saying the Dajjal al-Kalbi, Gabriel the Archangel. And that's the nature of spirit. Meaning it's not peculiar to angels. But jinn, the power of transmutation. The jinn, they transmute. Like in hadith of Sayyidina Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala anhu warda, when he's placed over the Bayt al-Mal, over the treasury. And then he has an issue of the transmutation of a jinn, of a demon, who comes each and every single night to attempt to steal from the Bayt al-Mal. And every single night Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu goes to take him to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but then ultimately lets him go and he pleads clemency. And then eventually when Abu Hurairah lets him go, because he teaches Abu Hurairah about the benefit of Ayatul Kursi, and Abu Hurairah, when he goes to the Prophet ﷺ, the Prophet ﷺ informs us that was a demon who's a habitual liar, but in this instance he's telling the truth. It's an issue of transmutation. But likewise, human beings, man, spiritual man, has the ability to transmute. Man. And you'll engage that more so in the wonderful and beautiful world of the awliya themselves. And of the issues of the awliya, that the transmutation of the souls of the awliya, it's true, unadulterated transmutation. What does that mean? They transmute just like angels into form. It's not like colonization of another form in the same way. And what do we mean by that? It's not the issue of demons, involving demons that are impersonating a human being. But it's the ability to truly transmute into form. That's the property of the awliya. But the property of people who have larger souls, but they've used those souls for evil, they have a type of transmutation, but it always involves the issue of the demonic world, the issue of the shayateen. That's the Antichrist. Okay. That's why the Prophet ﷺ said that the Antichrist is a human being, but alongside him, shayateen, demons, tumathal, that are going to take the form of human beings upon his behalf. The supreme form, the protected form, is the form of the Prophet ﷺ. In the hadith in the Sahih al-Bukhari, in the shaitan, la yumathiluni, that the devil cannot take my form. I cannot take my form. That's what the Prophet ﷺ said. But it's as if, other than that, then it's fair game for demons. Even the form of God, quote unquote, we ask Allah Ta'ala for safety and security. That's tradition of the great al-Jailani, Sayyidina Abdul Qadir al-Jailani, and when he sees a manifestation that is perceived to be divine, and then he informs Sayyidina Abdul Qadir al-Jailani about the degrees of ascension that has been granted. Yani playing God, and that all sins now have been wiped. Playing God. And that now the law, ribqat al-sharia, the neck brace of the law has been lifted. Fuka ank. It's been lifted from you. Playing God. And then whom Sayyidina Abdul Qadir al-Jailani, he takes a stone and throws it towards the manifestation. And then the manifestation becomes dukhan. Fartaqib. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Fartaqib. In your wait, seek the day. When you see the sky come, bi dukhanin mubin. With evident smoke. Transmutation now. And then the voice emanates. Now it's demons, the devil. Ya Abdul Qadir, I have fooled 1,000 of God's awliya with that vision. 1,000 of them believed that they were engaging Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's problematic because it's a being that's going to play God. But if we're protected in the circle of prophecy, then we're protected. That's why you see the greatest manifestation of the Antichrist to date, fi ayyam al-Rasul, in the age of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam himself. And we're going to see the manifestation, flesh and blood, of the Antichrist. And you're also going to see projection of the Antichrist, the colonization of form. Where is that? Traditions in Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim of Ibn Sayyad or Ibn Sa'id. And of those people inside of the age of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, la shak, wa la rayb, there's no doubt whatsoever you're dealing with the Antichrist. Ibn Sayyad, Ibn Sa'id. And who says so? Yani Ali bin Abi Talib says so. Bab Madinatul Ilm. And halaf billah. Swore an oath by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when he was asked, Man ad-Dajjal? Who's the Dajjal? He said, Safi ibn Sayyad. And Safi ibn Sayyad is the Antichrist. Kalam of Sayyidina Ali bin Abi Talib, Bab Madinatul Ilm. The words of whom? Sayyidina Umar ibn Khattab, al-ilm in Sahih al-Bukhari. Knowledge, Umar ibn Khattab. That's in the tradition of Sayyidina Muhammad ibn Munkadir. That he says that I heard Muhammad ibn Munkadir saying Jabir ibn Abdullah. Jabir ibn Abdullah, the great companion of the Prophet ﷺ, make an oath that Safi ibn Sayyad is the Antichrist. I mean Al-Akbar, the Antichrist. Not the 30 Antichrists that precede in a tradition. Not the 70-odd Antichrists that precede in a tradition. That are manifestations and projections. But the Antichrist. Sayyidina Jabir ibn Abdullah. Where did Jabir get it from? Jabir anhu wardaza, I got it from Umar. And Umar ibn Khattab halaf, that he made an oath in the presence of the Prophet ﷺ that Safi ibn Sayyad is the Antichrist. And he was not rebuked by Ankara sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Prophet never said, no, you're wrong. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Who says so? Sahib al-Quran, Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu ta'ala anhu warda. He said, it is more beloved for me to make 9 oaths, billah, on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Ibn Sayyad is the Antichrist, than one that he isn't. Similar statement you hear from Sayyidina Abu Dharr al-Khifari, who's important, Ashbah bi Isa ibn Maryam, as the Prophet ﷺ says, he's the one who bears the most striking resemblance in reality, Sayyidina Abu Dharr al-Khifari. In form, that's whom, Urwa ibn Mas'ud al-Thaqafi. But in terms of reality, it's whom, Sayyidina Abu Dharr al-Khifari. He went further than Sayyidina Sayyidina radiallahu ta'ala anhu warda, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. He said, I would take 10 oaths that he is the Antichrist, rather than one that he isn't. Now you can go on, Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Umar ibn Khattab, halaf billah, oath that is the Antichrist. Ibn Sayyad. Sayyidina Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, of the greatest rawis of the Quran, halaf billah, that Ibn Sayyad is the Antichrist. You're dealing with a manifestation of the Antichrist, but the most important of all realities, ما فعل شيئا. يعني خلاص. The fitan of the Antichrist never manifested. And he's present, but he's completely negated. Why? These are people who are connected to Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. These are Ahlul Dhikr, people of remembrance of Allah Ta'ala. These are people of Salah ala Nabi, people who are connected to the Messenger of Allah. These are Ahlul Qulub, people of heart, Ahlullah, wa khasatuh, the people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Look at the claim of Sayyidina Jabir. He said, radiallahu anhu warda, the Antichrist manifest, the kids of Medina will stone him out of the city. The kids of Medina to Munawwara will kick him right out of the city. The rijal of our time would find it difficult. That's why when he manifests, it's all insihabat. People back off from the Antichrist. They ain't going to face the Antichrist. But in that time, the kids could stand in front of him, kick him out of the city in and of itself. I mean, you see too many of the Sahaba who face him off. Look at Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Umar. From his father, And Sayyidina Umar ibn Khattab, when the Prophet goes to Ibn Sayyad in the Hadith al-Bukhari and Muslim, and then the Prophet says to Ibn Sayyad, man, ana, and who am I? Atashhad anni Rasulullah. Do you believe that I'm the messenger of God? Because this is the boy who was born at the sifat of the Antichrist. He had the form of the Antichrist, the sifat that the Prophet knew. He had the sifat as it relates to his mother and his father. His father being tall and gangly, and his mother being, quote unquote, of large breasts. That's in the tradition in of itself. Sifat. La yulad lahum mawlud. They have no child for 30 years. The sifat. And the Prophet even said, Abu Dhar al-Khifari, check, when he heard that the boy was born, to go and check the boy. And then Abu Dhar al-Khifari comes back with the affirmative. He has the sifat. And the Prophet goes and sees the boy. And then he will see the boy as he grows, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. But in an instance, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam goes to Sayyidina Umar ibn Khattab. Several instances with Sayyidina Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu. And on one of them, the Prophet, when he sees Ibn Sayyad playing with the other, he's a child now, playing with children in Medina to Munawwara, the Prophet darabahu, smacks him on his back, right up on his back. And then he turns round towards the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. The Prophet says, Atashhad anni Rasulullah. Do you bear witness that I'm the messenger of Allah? He says, La, no, I don't bear witness that you're the messenger of Allah. And then he says to the Prophet ﷺ, do you bear witness that I'm the messenger of God? It's a boy, Yukhatib al-Nabi ﷺ. Do you bear witness I'm the messenger of God? But look at the answer of the Rasul. Amantu billahi wa bi-malaikatihi. I believe in God and His messenger. And God and His word and His angels. In another way, Amantu billahi wa malaikatihi wa kutubi. I believe in Allah. I believe in the angels of Allah and in the scriptures, revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What's interesting there is that the Prophet ﷺ doesn't deny him being the messenger of God. That's again what our teachers say. It's not a denial he's being a messenger of God. And so what's the understanding there? Is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has messengers in the world of duality. Just like He has messiahs in the world of duality. So just as we have the Messiah, Jesus the son of Mary, we have the Masih and Dajjal. We have the Antichrist. And just as we have the Rasul, the messenger, we have the anti-messenger. Just as we have, as the ulama say, Masih al-Huda, we have the Messiah of guidance, we have Masih al-Dalala. We have the Messiah of misguidance. Just we have Rasul al-Huda, who الذي بعث في الأميين, who بعث في الأميين رسولا. He is the one who sent amongst the oral ones, the Ummiyeen, a messenger. In a riwayah, Safi bin Sayyad said to the Prophet ﷺ, when he asked, do you believe I'm the messenger of God? He said to the Prophet ﷺ, I believe you're the Rasul of the Ummiyeen. That's the word he uses. Sahih Muslim. You're just the Rasul of the oral ones. And he is the one who sent amongst the Ummiyeen al-Rasul. That's Rasul al-Huda, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Khatam al-Nabiyyin wa Khatam al-Mursaleen, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. But there's also a Rasul of misguidance. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, we dispatched ourselves. We dispatched demons. We sent demons as Rusul. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says. Bearers of glad tidings, Huda, and bearers, Mundirin, of wickedness, of evil, likewise. Do you understand the point? And that's what they mentioned about the issue of Safi bin Sayyad. There's too much clam upon Safi bin Sayyad. The Prophet said, ask him, Inni khabaktu laka khabi'an. Look at this way, Sa'ad. I've hidden something for you. What is it that I've hidden for you? And then he says to the Prophet ﷺ, Duh, duh. He said, duh, duh. And then the Prophet ﷺ said, Ikhsa, be wretched. Lam ta'adu qadrak. You cannot go beyond the veil. You cannot go beyond your divine boundary. The Prophet ﷺ says. Meaning he's been completely negated, as we'll explain. But look what he said, duh, duh. What does he mean by duh? Duh. You see, playing God. Smoke. That's what he means by duh, duh. Dukhan. That's what he means by duh, duh. What did the Prophet hidden for him? Surah Dukhan, inside of his heart. That's what, Yoma, and on the day when the sky comes, bi Dukhan al-Mubin, fartaqib, on that day. That was the verse in the heart of the Prophet ﷺ. Others had the Prophet, the verse had been written upon his hand. sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, that verse. What have I hidden for you? And he said, Dukh, Dukh. What is that? He accessed the reality of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, that which the Prophet has hidden. But then the Prophet understood at that point in time, khalas, la ta'adu khadrak. You cannot go beyond your divine capacity. You're negated inside of this age. That's Safi bin Sayyad. Look at Abu Sa'id al-Khudri. So we get the point. I think that's the most central point about Ibn Sayyad until it manifests in the ages to come. Sayyidina Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, radiallahu ta'ala anhu warda, he says he's upon a journey. It's like others. Umar wanted to kill him. Rasul said, let him be. Because what? If he is who he is, you have no power over him, the Antichrist. And the power is for Jesus, the son of Mary alayhi salam. Abdullah ibn Umar, the son of Umar ibn Khattab, likewise goes for it. He said, I met him on 2 occasions, only twice did I engage him in Sahih Muslim. He said, the second time I engaged him, when I saw him, that his eye now were transmuted into the one eye, from the description of the Antichrist. Okay, that the right eye is completely closed, and the left eye, tafia, is protruding, is out, and it's half closed, and it's half, and he's blind in one eye completely, such that there's a khilaf over it. And it's never been open, and the second one is open, protruding, but it's difficult for him to see the Antichrist. And that's how Ibn Sayyad turned toward the end of his life. And Abdullah ibn Umar, when he faces him off, Ibn Khattab, in Sahih Muslim, he says, what's happened to your eye? Tell me about your eye. And he says, the eye, he says, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala so wills, this eye will be inside of your staff. Abdullah ibn Umar ibn Khattab, Sunnah al-Rasul, he has a staff. He said, this eye will be inside of your staff. Look at the Kalam and say, Abdullah. Abdullah says, my friends who were with me claimed, that's what he says, they claimed that I took my staff and smashed it over his head. But me, I don't recollect it, yani. All I just looked at my staff was broken in 2. In another riwayah, he had a Jewish friend, Sahibi, min al-Yahud, a Jewish friend, Abdullah ibn Umar, said he claimed that I punched him in the chest as well. I beat up Ibn Sayyad. That was the second time and the last time Abdullah ibn Umar met him. Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, rahimahullah ta'ala, met him on occasions. One, on an occasion of jihad. Another, on an occasion, going to Hajj, or it's mentioned Umrah. He's left Medina, going to Mecca to Al-Mukarramah. And now, the word is that he's the Antichrist. And then Abu Sa'id al-Khudri says, when we rest upon the way to Mecca to Al-Mukarramah, I'm looking, and all people have distanced themselves from him. And he said, it's just me and him alone. What's the first thought I have? Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, I wanted to take a rope, put it around his neck, tie it to a tree and strangle him. That's the first thing. But he understands, khalas, laysa lahu sabil. He has no way whatsoever. And so then he said, Ibn Sayyad takes his mata', takes his stuff, and he puts his stuff over mine. I said, get your stuff off, get it off, take it away, don't put it on my stuff. Then they bring milk, and Ibn Sayyad brings the milk to me to save me. I said, no, yani, khalas, I'm cool, I'm okay, I don't need no milk to drink. Milk's hot, and it's a very hot day, yani, I need something a lot cooler. And then Ibn Sayyad sits, and he says to Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, he says, don't you see that people are oppressing me? They consider me to be the Antichrist. He says, how can I be the Antichrist? And the Prophet said the Antichrist is a disbeliever. And here I am, I believe in Allah Ta'ala and His Messenger. He said, the Prophet said, the Antichrist, la yulad lahu mawlud, that he has no children. Look, khalas, you see my children inside Medina to Munawwara. How can I be the Antichrist? He said, the Prophet ﷺ, he said that the Antichrist doesn't enter Medina. Here I am, Kharij. I've just come out of Medina to Munawwara. He said, the Prophet ﷺ said that he doesn't enter Mecca to Al-Mukarramah. Here I am with you, we're on our way to Mecca. And he enters Mecca. He said, Abu Sa'id al-Khudri is like, man's got a good point here. He's got that good point. And he said, at that point in time, I start feeling sorry for him. That maybe people have got it wrong. And then he says, he turns towards me. He says, do you want me to tell you where the Antichrist is? Do you want to tell you exactly where he is? And he said, at that point in time, it becomes evident that he begins to speak with the Antichrist. And then he says a very chilling word. Were his reality to be offered to me, full transmutation, I would readily accept it. Hadith in the Sahih Muslim. I would readily embrace it and accept it. And then Sayyidina Abu Sa'id al-Khudri says, Tabban laka, tabbat laka. May you be wretched for the rest of the day. And he khalas walks from him. He said, Ibn Sayyad. I mean, proofs upon proofs upon proofs. Look at Sayyidina Abu Musa al-Ash'ari. Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, when they go beyond Khurasan, into the lands of Khurasan. And they conquer the lands of Khurasan, from the lands of Asfahan to the lands of Sus. He said when they get to a land called Sus, a city-state called Sus, that the people of the city, they say no. They say that this city cannot be opened except through the Antichrist. That's what our scholars in Ab and Jeddah taught us. The only one who we deliver this city to is the Antichrist. What is Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, of those who swore an oath that he's the Antichrist? He then calls into the army, and Ibn Sayyad is inside the army. Summons Ibn Sayyad forth. Ibn Sayyad walks forth, he goes to the door of the citadel, kicks down the door, walks into the city, they all raise their hands in celebration of the Antichrist. And tradition. Look at the opening of Asfahan. Study this in the age of Umar ibn Khattab. Study the opening of these great cities. In the city of Asfahan, of those whose name is Abdurrahman al-Dab'i, radiallahu ta'ala anhu warda, who's in the armies of those who conquered the city of Asfahan. I remember the traditions about the final emergence of the Antichrist. That's one of the cities that he comes out of in the hadith of Sayyidina Fatima bin Qais. That he comes out of what? The city of Asfahan. And from it will he made 70,000 Jews. Riwayah 70,000 magicians who were from the inner circle of the Antichrist himself at the end of time. But when they take Asfahan, the Sahaba radiallahu anhum wardahum, one of the individuals' name is on the authority of Hassan ibn Abdul Rahman. He said his father Abdurrahman al-Dab'i radiallahu anhu wardah, that he hears that they encamped the Sahaba radiallahu anhum wardahum. And then Asfahan, which is full of Jews, it's a Jewish city. To this day, Jewish city. Who was it? The president of Israel came out of one of the last presidents of Israel was Asfahani Jew. And so he says that he hears the Jews all celebrating. And so he goes to the Jews. He said he knew some of the Jews. He goes to the Jews and says, what is it? They're all celebrating, dancing, they're beating the dove. And he says, what's going on? He said, we have news, ghadan, tomorrow, that khalas, the Antichrist enters. And he said, you have news, the Antichrist is going to enter? He says, tomorrow. He says, so bitu ala what? He said, bitu. I spent the night upon the roof of his house that night. I want to see what's going to happen. But look at, shuf, for our point, I prayed the entire night. That's what he says. I'm in salah the entire night. He said, the next morning after Fajr, khalas, you hear the Jews begin to celebrate, and there comes whom? Ibn Sayyad, as he enters into what? Into Asfahan, and khalas, he disappears. Lam yurub, he never returned from that moment on. Okay? Other riwayah, radiallahu anhu, the hadith of Sayyidina Jabir, radiallahu ta'ala anhu warda, that was called the Harra. In our majalis, we spoke about the issue of Sayyidina Abu Hurairah, la tuballighuna sittin, don't allow us to reach the sittin. And he interpreted it as his 60. He personalized it, radiallahu anhu warda. And he dies in the year 59 on opinion, 58 on opinion, 57 upon opinion, radiallahu anhu Abu Hurairah. But what happened was the most major event in the Sittin, what's called the Harra, of the most major events, the Harra, which is the desecration of Madinatul Munawwara on behalf of the forces of Banu Umayyah. Okay, Muslim ibn Uqba, the desecration of Medina, till their beasts are urinating and defecating in the mosque of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the killing of an untold great number of Sahaba. Saying whom Jabir radiallahu anhu wa the hadith of Abu Dawood, he said, فَقَدْنَا Ibn Sayyad fil Harra. That's when he disappeared, Ibn Sayyad. Our point is this is a manifestation of the Antichrist. And the demons, yani, نُقَيِّرْ lahu shaytan, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, that we will designate demons for him. Demons. And that thereby those demons will be controlled by the Antichrist. In flesh and blood, where is he? That's in the hadith in Sahih Muslim. This is the time of the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And it's a hadith once again of the great woman Fatima bin Qais radiallahu ta'ala anha wardaha, who says that she hears the adhan being called from the mosque of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And then the adhan, as-salatu jami'ah. Salatu jami'ah is towards the end of the Madani period. As-salatu jami'ah. It's like what you hear for like Taraweeh, right? Sometimes you hear that even for jihad. And so the Sahaba all come out of their houses, what's going on? It's not the time for prayer. But they know it's an issue of importance. But again, just like Sayyidina Abdurrahman al-Dab'i, the Prophet leads the companions inside of prayer. What prayer? We don't know. But they pray. And thereafter the Prophet takes to the minbar, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And then the Prophet says him, yadhak. Dahik of the Rasul, the Prophet is smiling, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. That's ahwan. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the khalq as-samawati wal-ard akbar min khalq al-insan walakin akthar an-nas la ya'lamun. That's one of the verses of the Antichrist. The creation of the heavens and the earth is greater greater than the creation of man, and of a type of man, the Antichrist. Ahwan, he's insignificant in reality. But the majority of people don't understand that. I wasn't laughing, that's the issue of the Antichrist. And then the Prophet says, do you know what makes me smile? And then the Prophet says, Tamim al-Dari, radiallahu ta'ala anhu warra, saying Tamim al-Dari, great companion of the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, kana nasraniyan. He was a Christian. And he took to the ocean. Where is he from? He's from Palestine, saying Tamim. And he takes to the ocean. What's the ocean here? The meaning of it? The Mediterranean. From Palestine into the Mediterranean. Takes into the ocean. In a ship. And this ship has smaller boats to its side. And they sail and they sail and they sail. And then they're caught by waves. And then waves begin to play with them. Thalathina yoma, for a month. Or even greater, plays with them, sending them where? Hatta maghrib al-shams. Until they reach the furthest west. I got it, the hadith of Sahih Muslim. Hadith of Sahih Muslim. And then when they reach the furthest west, that they're thereby shipwrecked. They take to the smaller boats and they thereby go towards this jazeera, this island that manifests. And they sail to this island. And when they get to this island, they see this beast. That's the Dajjal. That's the Jassasa. They see this beast. They see this beast was humongous. We couldn't tell its front from its back. In another riwayah, the beast, the Daba, feminine. It's a woman. Imra, the way they use Imra. It was a woman. We couldn't tell its front from its back. And then lo and behold, the beast speaks. And they ain't really interested in what the beast is saying. They just are scared as hell of the beast. They say, we just want to get out of it. And then when they ask that way the people who've been shipwrecked, the beast says, you ask me no questions, go to the one inside of this monastery, this daya, the way he uses. They said, we weren't interested in who's in the monastery, we just want to get out of there. So they quickly leave, saying the Tamim al-Dari radiallahu ta'ala anhu warda, and they enter into the monastery. And there in the monastery, they see the biggest human being that they've ever seen. That they've ever seen. And that's why so many of them say Akbar, that when the Prophet says that the fitna of the Antichrist is Akbar, the greatest since the creation of Adam, some of the ulama make the qiyas on Sayyidina Adam. That Adam was a being of huge proportion, Sayyidina Adam alayhi salam. And 60 cubits in the hadith in Sahih al-Bukhari. And the Antichrist is even bigger in size, huge in size. And they see the biggest human being that we've ever seen, and that his hands are chained, supremely chained to his neck, so that he can't move. Types of chains that they've never seen. And then they begin to address the human being that were the people from the Palestine region, and they tell him what has occurred, and how they've landed upon the island, what's our way out. And he said, you're from the Palestine region. He says, tell me about Nakhlatul Baysan. Tell me about the date palm trees of Baysan. Tell me about them. Do they still bear fruit? Do they still give fruit? And they still bear dates? They said, yeah, they still bear dates. He says, khalas, soon they won't. He says, tell me about Lake of Tabariya. Tell me about the lake of Tabari, the Tabari Lake. Tell me about it. Does it still have water? He said, yeah, it's got plenty of water. He said, soon not a single drop will be there. He said, tell me about what? Ain Zuhar. Tell me about the spring well of Zuhar. And khalas, does water come forth from that fountain, from that spring? They said, yes, water's still there. He said, soon it won't. And no, those three, all of them are ecological. Things that are due to connect to the natural environment. Then he said, tell me about An-Nabi al-Ummi. That's the way to use it. Tell me about the Nabi al-Ummi, the oral prophet. And Bu'if, has he manifested? He said, yes, he's manifested in Arabia. He said, what's his affair? He said, his affair is harb, it's war. He said, with his people, with the Arabs? He said, yeah, with the Arabs. He said, men ghalab. Yani, khalas, what is the kid? Who's victorious? He said, khalas, he was victorious. He's locked down Arabia. And then he says, I am the Antichrist, the Masih al-Dajjal. I'm based upon what you have told me, which doesn't relate to the date palm tree, because it's full of water. It doesn't relate to the Lake of Tabariya. The date palm is full of dates. Not Lake of Tabariya, it's full of water. Ain al-Zuhar, full of water. But it relates to Nabi al-Arabi, Nabi al-Ummi sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. That now, permission is going to be granted for me now to have final manifestation. But of the things that's important inside the Antichrist is that he's mawthuq, that he's completely chained. And the ulama, our teachers have it in transmission that is only for the age of the Prophet ﷺ. Okay? So of his colonizations is of the form of Ibn Sayyar. But it can't become full because he's chained, restricted upon the island in and of itself. And thereafter, upon the death of the Rasul, that's why it's the first and the greatest musibah. The death of the Prophet ﷺ in fikak, that the chains of the Antichrist upon his island, khalas, he's been released. And now we see it beginning to reach what? Critical mass. I.e. that the Antichrist, whether it's the 30 Antichrist in the riwayah, manifestations, or the 70 Antichrists in the riwayah, 70 orders the Prophet ﷺ says, that they have happened since the death of the Rasul, until it becomes more and more and more intense, until you see his final emergence, his final manifestation. And alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, khalas, and never does evil manifest, save that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prepares us for it. Okay? And tribulations inside our day and age, of the things the Prophet has informed us how to protect ourselves from the Antichrist, if the moment comes, will be faced off from him, is a surah. Surah Al-Kahf. And it's sort of a litmus test for us, if not, as it's gone before, but from this moment onwards. Do we recite Surah Al-Kahf upon a Friday? If we don't recite it this Friday, the Friday after, it's kalam. All of this is kalam. So, of no avail. It's just mere entertainment. It's not guidance, huda, from Rasul al-Huda, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Because the nature of guidance, it transmutes. It transforms the form, transforms the soul into those that are proximate to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And look, you on Kalam of the Rasul, 3 verses from Surah Al-Kahf. That's a tradition. 5 verses, words of the Rasul, 5 verses in the beginning. That's a tradition of Sayyidina Abu Darda. 10 verses in the beginning. 10 verses in the end. The Prophet said, if you face off the Antichrist, iqra alayhi fawajih Surah Al-Kahf. If you face off on the Antichrist, just recite the Antichrist, the beginning of Surah Al-Kahf. Khalas, mana'a, you're protected. The highest degree, the entire Surah Al-Kahf from beginning to end. But asrar of Surah Al-Kahf. What Surah Al-Kahf about? Fitan, tribulations, Surah Al-Kahf. 4 tribulations in the 4 narratives inside of Surah Al-Kahf. The first and the most important, which is fawatih, in the beginning of Surah Al-Kahf, is the fitna of what? Iman, faith. It's the fitna of Ashab al-Kahf themselves. It's the fitna of faith, the tribulation of faith, that you will be stripped of faith in that age. And if you want to be saved in that age, you have to back off. You can't engage. You can't engage the Antichrist. That's why they take flight. Even the Mahdi himself takes flight. There's only one being who can face off with him, and that's whom? Jesus, the son of Mary alayhi salam. So you've got to take protection. Where? Medinatul Munawwara. Antichrist can't enter Medina in final manifestation. You got to enter Meccatul Mukarramah. Mecca, khalas. Antichrist can't enter Meccatul Medina. Secured by the angels of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Mecca, secured by whom? Mikael. Mikael descends to protect what? Mecca from the Antichrist. And when the Antichrist approaches Mecca, he finds Mikael, the archangel Mikael, protecting it. Khalas. A being of the unseen. Basartu, I saw that which they never saw. That's his words. Medina to Munawwara, khalas, sorted Medina. Who protects Medina? Sahib al-Medina, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. But from the angelic realm, Gabriel. It's Gabriel protecting the city of the Prophet, the supreme angel. From the Dalils, that is the supreme city, Medina to Munawwara. There is not only Gabriel, but upon all the 7 pathways to Medina to Munawwara, you have 2 other angels besides Gabriel, with swords unsheathed. And the Antichrist, Yubsir, Basar too. I see that which they did not see. And so he goes to his natural habitat, which is the swamps, the swamps of Medina. Now people are trying to fool you that it's a palace, the palace of King Fahd. They're trying to fool you that it's a palace. That ain't no palace. But the Antichrist knows a palace. That's what he says. Whose is the white palace? When he stands up on the swamp. Whose is the white palace? He says, Qasru Ahmed. And look at the word Ahmed, the unseen reality of the Rasul. That's Ahmadiyya of the Messenger of Allah. And he speaks about the unseen reality. That's Qasru Ahmed. And The mosque is a qasr now. That mosque has never looked like that. And in the time of what? Of the Prophet ﷺ, it was mud date palm trees, brown. Time of Abu Bakr, brown and date palm trees. Time of Sayyidina Umar, brown. Uthman ibn Affan builds it into stone, becomes black. The mosque of the Prophet had black stone. Uthman ibn Affan remains that way up until the era of the Fatimids. Then it becomes brown once again. The era of the Uthmaniyin, Banu Uthman, the Ottomans, it's brown. It's only in the era of these people that has become a white palace. White. Just looks like a palace. Not only white, scientifically, sure, scientifically, it's the most brightest place on planet Earth. Right. Confirmed in science. When you look at the Earth, the brightest spot upon Earth is the mosque of the Prophet ﷺ. That's bright and light. That's the message. You can't enter Medina to Munawwara, the Antichrist. You got to take refuge. You can't enter Jerusalem, the capital city of the Mahdi himself. Can't enter Jerusalem. You got to take refuge in Jerusalem. Riwayah, he can't enter Najran. Najran between the Yemen and what is called Saudi Arabia today, the Najd. Can't enter Najran, Riwayah. Tur, Mount Tur. Take to the mountains. You can't enter Tur. Khalas. Where else? The Bawadi, the mountains and the deserts, wilderness. Take residency in there. You can't enter them. Or not that he can't, but he doesn't. He's too busy with quote-unquote civilization, quote-unquote the Antichrist. But the point is, you have to remove yourself from his presence. Okay? In the age of his final emergence. The age of the infikak. His emergence is out of where? And this in our durus, we spoke about the Mahdi. The durus of the Mahdi, that's the age in which he emerges. And the Mahdi is where? The Mahdi is in Constantinople. That's the ghadab. Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Umar, on one occasion, when he smacks Ibn Sayyad, he goes and tells his sister Hafsa al-Mu'mineen. She says, what are you doing? Hafsa says, don't you know that the Prophet ﷺ said that the Antichrist emerges ala shay'in yughdibuhu, due to something that enrages him, that grips him in anger. It's through anger that he emerges. Don't vex, because you will see final manifestation. Hafsa says to her brother, Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Umar, what is the thing that enrages him in the hadith? The opening of Constantinople. Okay? When Constantinople falls, that is the manifestation of the Antichrist. Okay? His first manifestation. And as soon as it falls, the first waves that reach the Mahdi is that now he's manifested. The Antichrist is manifested. And they send the army down to Sham, down to the Levant, to Damascus and to Jerusalem. And they find that the Antichrist is not there. But in the tradition, that's his first emergence. He manifests in Sham, then he disappears. And then the Prophet ﷺ, immediately after that, you'll see him manifest, the Antichrist. In another riwayah, when the Medina, Kharab al-Medina, Tukhrab al-Medina, when the city Tukhrab, Medina Tukhrab, that's the manifestation of the Antichrist. Okay? Another riwayah, Qati', that when Qati', which we explained, is what's left, the remnants of America, Khalas. When that is opened, liberated, that's the manifestation of the Antichrist. And that's how you interpretate Medina. That Medina doesn't mean Medinatul Munawwara, but Medina means Medinatul Qati'. That when that is liberated by the Antichrist, which is immediately after Constantinople, then you'll see the final manifestation of the Antichrist. Emerges from where? Multiple traditions, which again, these are issues of spirit, omnipresence of spirit, that manifest or born in Egypt, his final emergence. Traditions sound that he comes out of Asfahan, in a place called Rastaqbad, inside of Asfahan in and of itself. That's traditions. Traditions, he comes out of a place called Maru. It's called Mev in our day and age. Traditions that he comes out of a place called Kufa. Where is that? Babel, Iraq. That's where his emergence he comes out of. And his emergence initially, it's good. The Prophet tells us that his final emergence, he's going to preach deen. He's Jewish. And he's Yahud, that's the tradition. But khalas, he's going to preach the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Until eventually, where does he take control of? As a good man, quote unquote, Kufa, the southern city of Iraq, Kufa. He takes control of Kufa. And the Prophet said he will rule Kufa with righteousness for 2 years. Until people are going to consider him to be a righteous man. And he rules Kufa. And then you see what's called istidraj. As Allah Ta'ala says, we shall take them in degrees from where they perceive not. And we will lower down the rope of deception to them. In the Kaidi Mateen. Verily, my stratagem is firm, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says. Because from righteousness, he declares now he's a prophet. Okay? And those who oppose him, killed, for the very few, inside of Kufa. He declares he's a prophet. And the prophet doesn't Muslim know who the last prophet is. And so people who have faith inside of their heart, they remove themselves from his presence. And then thereafter, he's going to begin to declare that he's God. Ana Rabbul Alameen. I am the Lord of the worlds. That's what he says. I am the Lord of the world. And at that point, you see the transmutation of his face. That's where you see the eye close, and then you see the eye protrude. That's where you see the hair move out, and then that's when you see the body, the hands become mushawwa, like long hand, short fingers. That's when you see the legs, likewise, odd legs of the Antichrist. That's when you see a changing in color. Now the Antichrist in riwayas, he's described as the Prophet Abyad Amhaq, like Northern European of complexion. In riwayas Ahmar, that is reddish, ruddy complexion. In riwayas Adam, that is dark in complexion. 3 different complexion. Again, that when somebody has that type of property, that's the issue of the spirit. That spirit gripping form, the ability to transmute form, even in complexion in and of itself. Okay? But there's a transmutation at that point in time. And it's at that point his wickedness begins. His wickedness. And the Khawarij begin. The suspensions of the norm likewise are going to begin at that point in time. You see from the Khawarij that now the Prophet ﷺ says there's not a single city upon the face of the earth, village upon the face of the earth, qarya, hamlet upon the face of the earth, any inhabited place upon the face of the earth, save that within a 40-day period, that he's going to step foot upon it, the Antichrist. Step foot upon it. On a beast that is hairy, that the Prophet ﷺ said is the barathul rih. Okay? It's the barathul sahab. That it's what? It's a wind, or that it's a cloud, a wind that leaves behind clouds. It moves like the wind, the beast. Prophet describes it as a donkey, and another riwayah describes it as a mule that he rides upon. That between his 2 ears is 40 cubits, the Prophet ﷺ says. And we can speculate all we want that that's airplanes. We have no airplane that we know of that can travel at that speed. I mean, the fastest they've got now is what? Is at the speed of sound. That's what they've got. What is it? London to Japan in 2 hours? That's what they say. That it has to go outside of the sphere and then goes to Japan in 2 hours. They've got the technology for it. That's what they declare. But it's faster than that. They also describe the speed of it, just like the speed of the Barak in this blessed month. The mystical beast of the prophecy that it places its hoof upon the horizon. That's the speed of it. Such that it can now go to each and every single place upon planet Earth in a 40-day period with Antichrist upon it. Just in order to subjugate people to his belief that he's the Antichrist, that he's God in and of himself. But look at Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah assists us. If you're not in the army of the Mahdi, or you haven't got the good sense to go to one of the aforementioned places to remove yourself from his presence, then what happens? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends in front of the Mahdi to each and every single place a woman. The Prophet ﷺ says. And that woman, her name is Tayyiba. Tayyiba, that's the name of the woman. And then the woman comes to warn. She said, the man is about to approach. Fahdharu. Be careful of him. He's about to approach the man. She warns everybody about the approachment of the Antichrist. Meaning, you have time to remove yourself from the city before he arrives. And likewise in the tradition, Allah Ta'ala sends 2 angels who initially in Kufa are with the Antichrist. When the Antichrist declares that he's God. 2 angels descend and they transmute into the form of Ilyas and Yasa, the 2 prophets. They take on the form of these 2 mighty prophets. Okay? And then the first prophet, when the Antichrist says, I am God, the first of them, the angel says, Kadhabta, you are a liar. But those who are present, ma basaru, they didn't see, they didn't hear, they don't hear the articulation of the angel. And then the second angel who speaks, he says, Sadaqta, you've spoken the truth. Speaking to the other angel, yeah, he's a liar. But people only hear the word, Sadaqta, you've spoken the truth. And then they believe he's corroborating the claim of the Antichrist that what? That he's God. Fitna. And so what then do you do? But then those 2 angels go just like the woman ahead of the Antichrist to every city and warn every single city that the Antichrist is approaching. And who listens and who doesn't? Fitan that the Prophet ﷺ says it's Khawarij, that his hand He can send it into the heavens. And he can bring down rain from the heavens. And that's important. Because the 3 years prior to the manifestation of the Antichrist, the Prophet ﷺ says in year 1 that the heavens withholds 1/3 of its rain. And the earth withholds 1/3 of its vegetation. Year 2, the heaven withholds 2/3 of its rain. And the earth withholds 2/3 of its vegetation. Year 3, the heavens withholds all of its rain. Prophet said not a single drop falls in year 3 in the entire year. The entire earth. And the earth withholds its entire vegetation. I mean, look at women. One of them, the Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anha wardaha, she says to the Rasul when she's hearing the tradition, it's in her house, he's saying the tradition, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. She says, Ya Rasulullah, she's making bread. She's kneading the dough. And she's like, Ya Rasulullah, we have dough, we have bread we can eat. مَا يَكْفِيهِمْ يَوْمَئِذٍ. How will they survive upon that day? What does the Prophet ﷺ said? Dhikr, a tasbih, with tahleel, with takbir. That's how they survive. Spiritual people are through Subhanallah, through Allahu Akbar, through La ilaha illallah, Qut al-Qulub. That's how they survive. Yani, if you, as they say, dhawq, ashab dhawq, if you don't taste dhikr, now how are you going to taste it then? Remember the day that khalas, لم تكن آمنت من قبل. It's not going to benefit you if you haven't believed prior to it on that day. If you don't know how to sustain yourself through the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is one of the most important advices we give. That we have to become dhakirin. Dhakirin Allah kathira wa dhakirat, as Allah ta'ala says. We have to become male and female people who make much remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that our souls become alive and our souls become fortified. We have to become those type of people. And this affair is not a simple affair. It's not a simple affair. And so then when he comes and there's no rain and there's no vegetation, and the Prophet said the animals would die upon the face of the earth, then he's the one who raises his hands to the sky and brings rain from the sky. He's the one who sends his hand not only into the earth and brings forth vegetation, but he sends his hand into the sea. It doesn't reach the bed of the ocean, but it reaches the ocean, the depths of the ocean, the Prophet says, and he can bring out any of the inhabitants of the sea that he wants, fish. He can fish with his hands and feed people. That's what our teachers say. And look, people, that they're going to be misguided by the Antichrist because of luqmat al-aish, because of food. And that's the themes of Surah Al-Kahf. In the themes of Surah Al-Kahf, there are 4 fitan. The first and the most important is the fitna of deen. That's the first narrative. The second of them is the fitna of food, vegetation. That's the second fitna. The third fitna is the fitna of knowledge, of ilm. And the fourth fitna is the fitna of hukam. They're the 4. Governance, rule. They're the 4 tribulations inside the Surah Al-Kahf. And it's those, if we succumb to them, we're not people of tawheed, fortified. We're not people of spirituality, fortified. Such that, it's not an issue of food. We're not people of who are fortified by knowledge, ilm. That which manifests in the age doesn't allow us to lose confidence in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's people. Okay? Like Moses questioning Khidr. That's the third narrative. No, khalas, we know وَفَوْقَ كُلِّ ذِي عِلْمٍ عَلِيمٍ. Above everyone who has knowledge, someone who's more knowledgeable. And then the last, the fitna of Dhul Qarnayn and Gog and Magog, and Juj and Majuj, which is the fitna of hukam, of governance in and of itself. Okay? Because that's where we are sent astray in the age of Antichrist. By ulama, as the Prophet said, it's not the Dajjal that I fear for you. But I fear for you ulama as-su'. I fear for you scholars who are evil, who misguide, dal wa mudil. The Prophet said, they're misguided and they misguide. That's one of the ways we deviate. And the second way we deviate, hukam, rulers of polity. لا طاعة لمخلوق مع معصية الخالق. That there's no obedience to Creator when it constitutes disobedience to the Creator. There's no obedience to creation when it constitutes disobedience to the Creator and of Himself. Okay? So we fortify ourselves from all of these tribulations in and of themselves. Now, we fortify ourselves. In the tradition of what the Antichrist manifests in the year 80, in the 8th decade, that's it, that he manifests. What time does one have left if it's the 8th decade of this century, the century of the 1500 of the Muslims? And what time do you have left in order to prepare yourself for it? Fitna yuntada. Then when he's bringing rain out of the skies and vegetation out of earth and beasts from inside of earth. When he brings you Jannah wa Nar, I'm your Lord, here's paradise and here's hell. What type of faith do you have when the Prophet says, when he shows you paradise and hell, jump into hell? Yani if man shows you hellfire, never mind hellfire, man shows you fire, would you jump into fire? Would you listen to a man who tells you to jump into fire? Look at the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and Sahaba radiallahu anhum wa radahum. The Sahaba who's appointed as an Amir, he's appointed as Amir, sent on the sortie. And then he said, I'm your Amir, right? I'm the boss, right? I'm boss. He says, you have to obey me. You know what the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said. So what does he say? Khalas, light a fire. So he light a fire. He said, right, because I'm boss, I'm the leader, everyone jump into the fire. Everyone jump into the fire. And look at the Sahaba radiallahu anhum wa radahum. Half of the Sahaba who are with him go to jump into the fire. They go to jump into the fire. The other half, khalas, they're fighting with those who want to jump into the fire. Look at the Sahaba. Of those who want to obey, those who want to disobey. And then, what did he say? Just test me, it's only messing. That's what he said. Then when they go back to the Prophet ﷺ, said, had they entered that fire, they would have been in it eternally. That's what he said, ﷺ. Because there's no obedience to creation when it constitutes disobedience to the Creator. That time, the Prophet is commanding you, jump into fire. Kalam Mustafa, jump into it. Which one of us will? You're going to be like Ashab al-Ukhdud, huh? You're going to jump into fire, like Ashab al-Ukhdud inside the Quran, Surah al-Buruj. Who jump into fire, they jump into it. And the greatest believers, you're going to do that? Which one of us have that type of faith that we will jump into fire in the belief and we're seeing paradise in front of us? And of the most difficult things the Rasul says, it is fire until you are completely submerged in it. Yeah, you're like, this ain't bad after all. But in the beginning it's you're touching it, it's fire. And in paradise, you're like, paradise? Wow. You see the paradise, you're like, this really is Jannah. This is paradise. Until the Prophet said, if you jump right into it, then khalas, you're in the midst of hellfire. In another way, it's a river. That when you submerge yourself into it, khalas, that when it becomes paradise, if it's fire, and it becomes fire, if it's paradise manifest. Yani, illusions of the Antichrist, how he can make us believe that. The Antichrist in and of himself. The miracles that he manifests, the Prophet ﷺ said, يُبْحِرُ الْعُقُولِ, that they just bewilder the intellect in and of itself. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to render us safe, inshallah, tabarakallah. And in conclusion, inshallah ta'ala, that the Antichrist thereafter, that's the emergence of whom? Of Sayyidina Isa ibn Maryam alayhi salam. That the rule of the Antichrist is 40 days. But just like he can play with human beings, with forms, and he can play with the jinn, and he can play with space so that he can travel in 40 days the entire earth, and he can also play with that which is inside the space, give you paradise, give you hell, give you a volcano of fire, a mountain of fire, give you a volcano of food, can manifest all of that. He can, malleable for him is things that are inside the space, likewise with time. Because in the riwayah, he's going to rule for 40 days. In the hadith in Tirmidhi, 40 days. The Prophet ﷺ said, one day like a year, then another day like a month, then another day like a Jum'ah, which means a week, and then another day like these days of yours, the Prophet ﷺ says. In Hadith Ibn Majah, 40 years, the Prophet ﷺ says. He said, 1 year like half a year. Another year like a month, another year like a week, another year like, and then the rest of the years are like, fire. When you light fire, all that flickering, like that. How time will move. Okay, when the Antichrist says, Ana Rabbul Alameen, I'm the Lord of the world. You want me to prove I'm the Lord of the world? He says, watch. And he takes control of the sun. Until he makes a day a week and a week a year. You get the point? He elongates time. Then he says, watch. He regresses the sun. And then he makes a day an hour. Moves faster. Playing with time. And what age are you in? When a man's there playing with time in front of you. And Allah Ta'ala, you can quote the hadith. Inna ibn Adam yasubbu dahar. Human being abuses time. Wa innani dahar, and I am time. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam says. And now it's time, Maghrib, inshallah, we have to move to Salah. Inshallah, tabarakallah, Antichrist killed by the son of Mary alayhi salam at Babylon, as we discussed. That's the end of his affair. Inta al-Amr. and to show you the end of his affair. And it's not manifestation. Jesus, why? By blood, with his what? With his harba, with his spear, he shows you the blood of the Antichrist. But you've got to contemplate, why does he show you the blood? That's it, it's finished. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. بسم الله وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. نويت تعلم وتعليم وتذكر وتذكير ونفع انتفاع والإفادة والاستفادة والحث على التمسك بكتاب الله وبسنة رسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم ودعاء الهدى ودلالة على الخير ابتغاء وجه الله ومرضاته وقربه وثوابه سبحانه وتعالى. This question reads, how do we explain the Dajjal having planes and technology with the opinion that technology will be destroyed? There's not a single tradition that says that the Prophet ﷺ, where he said that the Dajjal would have planes and technology. Okay, there's not a tradition which says that. And so the basis of the Antichrist, as it relates to the emergence of the end of time, it's from the world of the ghaib, the ghaibiyat, the world of the unseen. And as a rule in the world of the unseen, although theologically this more so applies to the issue of death, life after death, resurrection, etc., that ala zahiri, that you leave it upon the literal. I know, like quote unquote, many inside of our age, that they take the hadith of the Antichrist in particular, and they want to find some type of parallel in terms of the age in which we live in. And there's no doubt that things in the age in which we live in, that they are realities, quote unquote, or projections thereof, of evil that paved the way for the Antichrist. But it doesn't necessarily mean this is the age of the Antichrist, meaning that what we experience now, as an example, technology and planes, is that which is going to exist. When the Antichrist manifests, because prior to the manifestation of the Antichrist is severe trials and tribulations, Ayyam al-Mahdi, the age of the Mahdi. Okay? So the age of the Antichrist, for want of a better phrase, in its brevity, remember, it's only going to be 40 days. Although there is a shifting of time, our experience of time that manifests at the hand of the Antichrist, that is not necessarily what occurred prior. Okay? So I think we should be careful of that. Okay, really should be careful of it. It's kalam of the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And that's the words of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, they're not subject to doubt, nor are they subject to error. Okay, and one leaving it in the most literal manifestation is probably the most safest in that regard. Otherwise, it's as if it's too fantastic for us. Like it's too fantastic for like human beings to be of that size. Too fantastic for us, because we human beings have to be the size that we see them. Okay, it's too fantastic for the Antichrist to ride literally a donkey. And that's too fantastic for us. Like, the donkey has to be metaphor, because we're trying to understand it. Not necessarily the case. And maybe it is metaphor, but safety lies in leaving it upon the literal in and of itself. Okay, that's also what we could mention up at that point in time. Because at that point in time, then what's the Buraq? What are you going to say about the Buraq itself? The Prophet ﷺ. The Buraq was a plane. It was a 747 or something, the Buraq that the Prophet ﷺ took in this blessed month, on the 27th of Rajab, on that blessed night that he took ﷺ from Mecca to Medina to Munawwara. It couldn't have been a beast that had a human face, etc., and had the body of an animal, the hooves of a cow, and what have you now. It couldn't have meant that. All of that is metaphor. Okay? At that point, sometimes you get to a point where you begin to explain away religion, and you explain away religion by virtue of the weakness of your own faith. Remember, the affair Ahan, and it is the affair of Ahan, this is an affair of the strength of faith. The strength of faith. That's what we're speaking about here. Okay? And as alluded at the end of the question, that is an opinion that technology will be destroyed. And that's an opinion, we've heard that from our teachers. There's an opinion that before the age of the Antichrist, that there's a presupposition, not just the Antichrist, the Mahdi himself, that there will be destruction of technology in and of itself. And no doubt the age of the technopoly in and of itself, it must come to an end. And it has to come to an end. I mean, the issue of peak oil in and of itself is one of the things that will bring the civilization, as we experience it, to a radical close. That's just the issue of peak oil, and that peak oil is a reality in and of itself. And so we shouldn't get comfortable in the world in which we live from perspective. Since we don't know whether technology will exist, should we learn to use modern weapons, as well as archery and swords? And you learn to use the sword of the heart, the sword of the spirit. That's ultimately the affair. And the affair of that age is an inward affair, it's a spiritual affair in and of itself. And so you can be as King Kong as you want, If you're not spiritually fortified upon that day, then all it says is that you will ultimately, with all of your modern technology, quote unquote, if that age is an age of technology, you'll find yourself in the army of the Antichrist himself, as do many of the Muslims themselves. And those who has made mention by the Imam radiallahu anhu Safarini, those who accuse Sunnah of being bid'ah, and they now project bid'ah as being law. They manifested, therefore, manifestation of the Antichrist himself in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, influenced by him. And that is the likes of Dhul Khuwaysara or Al-Hawqas, likewise, who manifest those ones who are trying to take the Prophet out of the task. I'dal ya Muhammad, be just, O Muhammad. This, what you've given, la turid bihi wajh Allah, that you don't want by a God, you're not sincere. You telling the Rasul ﷺ you're not sincere. I mean, that's like even saying, you're telling the Prophet ﷺ, no, I don't believe you're the messenger of God. You believe I'm the messenger of God. How do you tell that to the Rasul? The Prophet, if I'm not just, then who's just? The Prophet ﷺ said. But from the reality of this being the Prophet ﷺ will come people. And that's people that we've seen in each and every single age. Of them, Dhul Khuwaysara, who is one of the fathers of them in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, in the tradition that the Prophet ﷺ commands for him to be killed. He was not killed in the age of the Rasul ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ dispatches Abu Bakr doesn't kill him, the Prophet ﷺ dispatches Umar ibn Khattab doesn't kill him. The Prophet ﷺ dispatches Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib. Ali ibn Abi Talib doesn't find him. Until when? Siffin, in the age of Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib, when he stands up on the battlefield against Ali ibn Abi Talib, accusing Ali ibn Abi Talib of kufr, of disbelief. And when they go to battle, he's vanquished. And Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib dispatches Sayyidina Hassan and Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Ja'far, I want body recognition, bring me his body. And they search for his body, and initially they can't find his body on the battlefield. And this Dhul Khuwaysara. We'll get to the point, And then what? Then they eventually find his body, and they show his body to Ali ibn Abi Talib. And Ali ibn Talib swears that the Prophet commanded for this being to be killed. And 70 companions of the Rasul ﷺ corroborated the issue of Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib. What's the point? Those people up until the age in which we live in, up until the age of the Antichrist. Because when Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib fought them, when they asked him, is this the last of them? We finished them, it's finished? He says no. The last of them will manifest in the army of the Antichrist himself, Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib. It's the age in which we live in. And those people have the Haramain. Those people. In the end, or in the wars at the end of time, will Muslim jinn be on the battlefield? I also hear trees will help. Can you expand upon this? Allah Ta'ala alam. Anyway, the Muslim jinn will be on the battlefield. Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala alam. And we don't even really get traditions of Muslim jinn being on the battlefield with the Prophet ﷺ. Okay? And what we're more concerned about is what? Is malaika. And angels will descend in that time. Okay? It's an age of spirit. So angels will descend. And likewise the great one, the son of Mary alayhi salam, who's greater than the angels. That's Ibn Maryam alayhi salam, Jesus, the son of Mary. And he descends, as we learned, inside of Damascus, and he meets the forces of the Mahdi, who will be surrounded by the force of the Antichrist in Jerusalem. And then Jesus then will lead the force of the Mahdi against the last Malhama. It's the last great war. The Prophet said after the Malhama to Dajjal, after the great war of the Antichrist, there's no more Malahim. There's no more great wars. That's the final great war. You have the three Malahim. You have three great wars. The Prophet ﷺ said in the age of the Mahdi. The last one called Malhamatul Kubra, which is the supreme great war when the forces of Rome face off against the actual forces of the Mahdi and of himself. That's called Malhamatul Kubra. After that Malhamat of Rum, Sataduzun, as the Prophet ﷺ said, you declare war on Constantinople, upon Constantinople, Istanbul, and Allah will grant you victory. Taduzun al-Masih al-Dajjal. Then you will go to war against the Antichrist. That's the final Malhama. But it's not from the three Malahim. It's independent Malhama. Malhama means great war. A great war, a seismic war. That's the last of them on the face of planet Earth. Thereafter, not even Gog and Magog is their war. Jesus on the Great Islam, as we learned, just takes them on tour. He's not going to face off with Gog and Magog. Although he faces off with the Antichrist, kills them at Bab al-Lud, as we have said at Bab al-Lud. And the issue of the trees, well, that's the issue of after the defeat after the killing of the Antichrist, then those who were the Antichrist, they begin to disappear. They all seek to go into the world of the unseen. And of the things of the Antichrist, as we mentioned, demons. And he colonizes
human beings, but it's through demons, the manifestation of demons. معه شياطين in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. And that's one of the manifestations of this issue of ihya and imata, of life and death. Because he claims, Ana uhyi wa umit. I give life and I give death. And the Antichrist comes out of the same city as Nimrod, who says that in the Quran, comes out of Babel. I give life and I give death, the Antichrist says. And from amongst them you'll ask people, Bedouins, you see Bedouins, you see likewise women, you'll ask them, who do you want to be revived? Men, women, who do you want to be revived? They say, well, my father. And then he'll stand over a grave, and he addresses the grave opens, and then you see, they see who they believe to be their father, or their mother, or their brother, or their son, and all their riwayas, all coming out of their grave one by one. And the resurrection upon behalf of the Antichrist. Although the Prophet has informed us that it's a devil who has assumed the form of the father, assumed the form of the mother. Again, that's the point of the Antichrist. Assumed the form of the son. In one way, the Prophet speaks of the woman who the Antichrist revives her entire family. He says she goes home and she sleeps with devils, with demons. She spends the night with demons in the belief that that this is her own family who's been resurrected by the Antichrist. Okay? What's the point is that when Isa ibn Maryam kills the Antichrist, all of those demons just completely disappear. Vanish into thin air. So you're with somebody you think is your father, that just disappears into thin air. Somebody you think is your mother, disappears into thin air. The hadith of the Bedouin, Antichrist asks him, what do you want me to revive? He says, my camels. Camels, the Bedouin, what's camels? Antichrist has camels it is. Even demons are going to take the form of camels. But when the Antichrist is killed, all of those demons disappear. Okay? But then there are people alongside the Antichrist who are not demons. What I mean from the jinn, from the sprite world. But they're demons from the human world. And from amongst them in that age, from the children of Banu Israel, the Jews. And so when the Antichrist is killed, they seek to hide. But there's every single tree, that's the question being asked, is now going to begin to command, Ya Abdullah, scream, Ya Abdullah, O son of, O slave of God, behind me is a Jew who's seeking to hide. Because now the forces of the Mahdi are now looking for those who are in the army of the Antichrist. Except one single tree, the Gharqad, the Prophet ﷺ said. That tree, khalas will not utter. Okay, that's a tree that will protect Banu Israel in that age, after the disappearance of the Mahdi. Okay? And can you please describe the beast at the end of time? What does it look like? How big is it? That's the Dabba, the beast. And as we said, Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As he's of the opinion that the beast, the Dabba, is the Jassasa. It is one of the same. And don't be confused about the Jassasa is like a spy vehicle, or the spy beast of the Antichrist. That's what Jassasa means, like a spy. But that beast, that Tamim al-Dari met upon the actual island, you see, that's why, subhanAllah, like sometimes you engage a being and you believe this being has ill intent for you. Only for you to go to a being who has real ill intent for you. So the beast sends him to the Antichrist. But that beast is a good beast. It's not evil. It's not evil. That beast is a good beast. And that beast is placed with the Antichrist as a nasih, as the one who advises the Antichrist. That's why the hujjah is against the Antichrist. And the hujjah not just from the prophets themselves, as the Prophet ﷺ says, that there's not a single prophet save that he's warned his people of the Antichrist. But I'm going to tell you something about the Antichrist that none of the prophets have ever told their people. أَنَّهُ أَعْوَى, that is one eye. وَرَبُّكَ لَيْسَ بِأَعْوَى, and your Lord is not one eye. And no doubt the symbol of the one eye in our day and age has dominance. It's dominance. Everywhere you look, you see the one eye. It's frightening, the one eye. Even over the Haram of Mecca, the Haram of Medina, and it quote unquote guarded by the one eye. That's the age in which we live in, okay? Okay, but here we're not speaking, it's not the issue of metaphor, that's what he means by one eye. The Antichrist literally has one eye that he barely sees through. Make sure you understand it in the most literal sense. Okay, so the beast is good and it's a nasih. It advises the Antichrist. And then khalas, upon the effect of the quyud, when the Antichrist is released, that beast disappears. Disappears. The beast, the Dabba, the Jassasa. And that beast will not re-emerge up until the very end of time. And it's the second of the Prophet ﷺ, the hadith in Tirmidhi, of the verse in Surah Al-An'am, where the Prophet ﷺ said, it's the second thing, when that beast manifests, khalas, nobody's going to be what? Nobody's going to be saved. After that point, and in fact the doors are being closed. If you haven't believed min qabl, as Allah Ta'ala says, prior to that point in time. Okay? But the beast, it's mentioned that the beast is going to carry the actual ring of Solomon, the ring of Sulaiman alayhi salam. Okay? And the ring of Sulaiman, inscribed upon the ring of Sulaiman, is La ilaha illa ana. That there is no God but I. That's upon the ring of power, the ring of Sulaiman. Muhammadun Rasuli. Muhammad is my messenger. That's the ring of Sulaiman. Although it's Sulaiman's ring, it has the name of the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam upon it. That the beast manifests with that ring. He manifests with the staff of Moses. He manifests with the Ark of the Covenant in the tradition. But it's with the ring. Because initially when people see the beast, like Tamim al-Dari, they run from the beast. And the first people to see the beast are those who are in the outer lies, in the desert regions. They're the first ones who spot it. And then ruler comes in the desert and this beast manifests. The beast, the literal beast, manifests. Nobody believes. It's the Bedouin who was speaking. Up until Hajj, that's when the beast manifests, right there at Safa. Comes right out of Safa in the tradition in of itself. And then people run for their life. And then the beast pursues them. Because it's good. And so then the beast then will stamp them right here. With the ring of Sulaiman alayhi salam. And then you will see nur, light, begin to appear upon their foreheads. The Prophet ﷺ said. And those who are stamped, khalas, they're saved. And then when people see they're being stamped and they're becoming illumined, these are the last believers, okay? People realize, khalas, it's a good beast. So now they run after the beast because they ikhtafa. The Prophet said, the beast just disappears. Meaning he gets you, you don't get him. And those believers, they're the last ones. That's when Allah Ta'ala now stays the wind and it takes what the soul of each and every single believer who has that stamp. Even the son of Mary alayhi salam, the son of Mary, Jesus son of Mary alayhi salam, that final wind. And then you have Ashrar al-Nas, and you have what? The most wicked of all people upon the face of the earth, alayhim, taqum as-sa'ah, upon them the hour will fall. If we want to be close companions with Imam Mahdi and Isa, what shall we do? You do that which your teachers have told you to do, which you've taken in transmission from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the affair don't change, and the nature of truth is not subject to change. And as Imam Malik rahimahullah ta'ala said, that which rectified the early people, rectified the latter people. And the manhaj is one, the manhaj is not changed. And when the manhaj changes, when the way changes, that's what you call bid'ah. That's what innovation is by critical definition. Okay? So, khalas. And I hear these questions, Allah A'lam, these two questions. And one question, it states, is there any narration, evidence, proof, with the concept of a person's soul being taken by, quote, the hands of Allah Himself? Allah A'lam, never heard that, Okay? It's well known that the souls of human beings is seized by Azrael, the angel of death. And is there any evidence of the awliya returning to earth after death to guide the ummah, to support Sayyidina Isa? But it's a living age, it's a age of living age. So beings who, maybe some people believe have died, but they're not dead. Okay, like Jesus, son of Mary alayhi salam. And of those who retain in that age, and around Jesus we mentioned, like Ashabul Kahf, it's mentioned. Okay, that's the beginning of Surah Al-Kahf, the reasons you recite against the Antichrist. Because they will be present. But amongst them also Khidr alayhi salam. Like Imam Nawawi brings his commentary about Sahih Muslim, Khidr alayhi salam, Rajah. His dominant opinion that Khidr, and Khalas, still alive. No, there's yet, manifested at the end of time. And he's the supreme martyr upon that day, or the greatest martyr to ever live. The Prophet ﷺ says in the tradition, that when the Antichrist approaches Medina to Munawwara, outside of Medina to Munawwara, then this man of the Prophet says is the greatest martyr on that day, or the greatest martyr. The Prophet ﷺ said, the Rawi mentions that he approaches, and then the army of the Antichrist take hold of him. And then he says, do you believe that you want to go and see God, our Lord? He says, your Lord, that's the Antichrist. And then you reading Sallatuna alayhi that he wants to now kill him, yaqtulunahu, and then one of the army says, didn't our Lord said we don't kill anybody? And that's one of the most amazing, in the age of the Antichrist, you're not seeing a lot of killing. That's past through the age of the Mahdi. The Antichrist is not about killing. The Antichrist is about idlal, misguidance. That's Imam al-Ghazali rahimahullah ta'ala said, ghayatuh. That is the furthest extent of what the Antichrist comes with, is to misguide you from the truth, not to kill. So look, even commanded his people not to kill. And so thereby they say, take him to our Lord then. And then they seek permission from the Antichrist, who then brings this being into his presence. And then the Antichrist says, do you believe I'm God? And he says, no, I believe you are the Antichrist, who our Prophet ﷺ described. And then the Antichrist thereby will sheathe sword and strikes him in two. He strikes him strikes him in two, cuts him into two. Then in the riwayah, the different riwayahs of the riwayahs, yub'id, that he sends one half away and the other half away. And then he's walking right through to show you that this is not an illusion. He's trying to show you like magicians do. Seen them and they saw people in half in the box and then they walk through it and they're playing games. But the Antichrist here walks through. Then the Antichrist returns back and then he commands for the body to come back together. And then the Prophet says until the body comes back together, and there he brings them back to life. Okay? That real, as Khawariq, that he kills him and brings him back to life. Now do you believe I'm God? And he says, all you have did is to increase me in certainty that you are the Antichrist now. And that's all you did. And then the Antichrist thereby goes to strike him, to kill him finally, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creates here, from his neck all the way to his chest, nuhas. He has an impenetrable fortress. And the Antichrist is striking him and can't kill him. So the Antichrist then takes hold of him and then commands him to be cast into fire. And then the Prophet ﷺ says, Khalas, right into Jannah he goes. That's the greatest martyr upon that day. The Imams are upon that Khadab alayhi salam in Surah Al-Kahf. And the third narrative. Okay, the narrative of فَوْقَ كُلِّ ذِي عِلْمٍ عَلِيمٍ. Above everybody of knowledge is somebody of different knowledge, of higher knowledge. Okay? You drink from an ocean and I drink from a different ocean. Sayyidina Khidr says to Sayyidina Musa ibn Imran alayhi salam. Okay? And likewise, Ashab al-Kahf. Opinion, there's an opinion there that is not Khidr. That's one of Ashab al-Kahf. That's one of the youths of the cave, who's the one who the Antichrist kills, who's the greatest martyr upon that day. That's opinions we find inside of our tradition, likewise. Okay? And Allah Ta'ala alam. So the issue of awliya returning back from the death, meaning they died, souls departed from form, and then they brought back to life, Allah Ta'ala alam. But what we do know is that it's an age of those who have extended life. And in that age, all of those who have extended life, their life is going to come to an end. All of them. Whether they be the forces of good like Jesus, or whether they be the forces of evil like the Antichrist. They'll all be what? And they'll all be brought to an end in that very same age. And they'll all taste of death. Kullu nafsin da'iqatul maut. Okay? And these questions here of Satan, awliya who are alive in our day and age, taking bay'ah with the Imam Mahdi, and we say Allah Ta'ala alam. And these awliya who have taken bay'ah with the Mahdi himself, then I suppose you have to find them and ask them themselves. Okay? How do you recognize people who take the form of demons and devils? And we live in an age of that. And we don't believe it because we just see people. That's what we live in an age of. We live in an age of, like the Imams radiallahu anhum wardahum, they said that demons are now being unleashed. It's a very, very demonic age. And demons, not just in the unseen world, yuwaswisu fi sudurin nas, whispering into the hearts of men from behind. But demons transmuted into the form of man. Okay? Now your business is not with demons, but your business is what is protection from demons. Like Imam al-Ghazali rahimahullah ta'ala says that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Allahumma a'udhu bika min hamazat al-shayateen wa a'udhu bika rabbi yahdurun. The way to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, oh Allah, I take refuge in you from hamazat al-shayateen. The hamazat al-shayateen are the insinuations, the agents of demons. The agents of demons. I am aging you on to perform evil, to stray from the path of truth. Wa a'udhu bika, and I take refuge in you and yahdurun, that they manifest, transmute into form at its highest level. I take refuge in you. And Ghazali says that's the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He's making that dua, the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And since when will a demon age him or affect him? Or since when will a demon even confront the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam? Demons. I mean, demon will confront Abu Hurairah as in the hadith. But they're not going to confront the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Just like they don't confront like the hadith of Umar. The shaitan al-akbar, the yafir min dhil Umar, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said. He flees from the shadow of Umar ibn Khattab. Won't confront Umar ibn Khattab. Because ashab dhikr, these are people of dhikr in and of itself, okay? And so these are the types of dua that our tongue should be moist with, okay? And like one of the most common places, look, one of the most common places where the demons are going to seek to deviate you inside of wudu. That's where it begins, before they get inside of salah. And that's one of the du'as of wudu, at the beginning of wudu. That du'a in and of itself fortifies you. And it should be a dua that's common upon our tongue, the dhikr that we should make inside of our day and age. So the issue is not engaging demons, recognizing demons. The issue is an issue of protection, fortification from them. But they can be recognized now. Is the Western education system a manifestation of the Dajjal system? Is the ink the island of the Dajjal? That's what I was saying, the ink is the island of the Dajjal. Maybe it is. Allahu A'lam. One who wrote the questions in problem, then it's me, because he wrote it with ink. I don't know. Allahu A'lam. It's a manifestation of the Dajjalic system. Any system of education that does not guide you to Allah Ta'ala and His Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, does not clarify your purpose in life and empower you to fulfill that purpose in life, no doubt is a manifestation of Idlal, a manifestation of the Antichrist. No doubt. That is ta'fir. What I mean, a ta'fir is an effect of the Antichrist upon that. That's no doubt whatsoever, okay? As for issues of ink being the island of the Dajjal, then Allah Ta'ala Alam. You know, we watch that type of stuff, like one of the ta'wilat that somebody made about the days of the Antichrist. Like a day is like a year. And then it's like a month, the Prophet says in the Hadith in Tirmidhi. The second day is like a month. And the third day is like a week. But he said the day is like a year is here 1,000, year like 1,000 with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. 1,000 years. And then a month, 300 years. And then like a week, 70 years. And so then, how are they going to interpret that? That's the technique that one of them made, is that they interpret 1,000 years, Britain's 1,000 years, the rule of Britain, 1,000 years. Okay, that's what it means. And then, what's the 300 years? America, the rule of America. Then what's the 70 years? The rule of what? Of Israel. I just said, like, Allah, I know, when the Prophet said, like, a day is like a year, a day is like a year. Get into all this 1,000 years, and that it's Britain, that it's America, and that it's Israel in and of itself. Maybe Britain doesn't have a good seerah, does it? Doesn't have a good history. Doesn't have a good history. This island, khalas. Our prayer and khalas. As we discussed, alhamdulillah, maybe has a good future. But history is not so good of the island. And in America, doesn't have a good history. It's America. Doesn't have a good history whatsoever. There's not been a single president in the history of America saying that they sanctioned war, except Jimmy Carter. That's not good, When all you did is kill and slaughter and usurp, that's not good. I'm going to be unjust here. This is not like anti-American rant. This is just, the scales of justice. We made you a balanced nation. Israel, same narrative as America. You have the same narrative. That's why one of them made mention, that's why America can't say anything against Israel. Because the narrative is the same. It's both usurped lands, both the slaughter of the inhabitants of that land. What did America tell Israel when they did the same to the natives of the land in and of itself? But Israel doesn't have a good history likewise. And so that's not taken away from that point, but to now say that's what is meant in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, in the hadith in Tirmidhi, then khalas, we stand before our Lord with that, if that's what one believes. If anyone have any questions, inshallah ta'ala, do you have any questions? And the question here relates to the hadith, which is in Sahih Muslim, hadith in Abdullah ibn Abbas, that is it incumbent for one to read the dua of, which seeks protection, you seek protection from the punishment of hell and from the punishment of the grave and from the tribulation of the Antichrist and from the tribulation of life and death. Is that incumbent to read? He said, ikhtilaf al-fuqaha, the fuqaha are odds in that regard. Of those who say it's wajib and of those who say it's mandu. I'd say that it's between recommended and wajib of them, we said. And I said that's why Imam Muslim, because Imam Tawus radiallahu anhu, he took the opinion that was wajib. And often the fuqaha of the Shafi'i school likewise will believe it's wajib, although it's not the rajih, it's not the opinion of the school. The opinion of the school that it's mustahab to actually recite that dua. Okay, and so if the answer is yes, as with the issue is not answer of yes, the question is asking, if the answer is yes, and he says, فَمَتَى يَكُونُ ذَلِكَ هَلْ تَكُونُ بَعْدَ التَّشَهُّدِ When does that occur? Yeah, after tashahhud and after salawat upon the Prophet ﷺ, there. Okay, that's the point. At the point of dua. Okay, tashahhud wajib, no doubt. Salawat ala Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam wajib. That's after that. That's what we speak of the mahal of dua, at the very end of the prayer. In the sitting, that's the point one would recite it. Yeah, qabla taslim, min as-salat, qabla taslim. Okay, وهل توجد يعني حديث يعني على ذلك. He said the hadith is in Sahih Muslim. Ibn Majah and others who speak about it. And what does Messiah mean? Yani, should we move to the sacred places now? Yani Messiah, yani, issue of the Messiah, yani أكثر من 50. There's more than 50 different interpretations of the Messiah, the Messiah, of what it means linguistically. And likewise with the Dajjal, over 10 different interpretations about what the Dajjal means linguistically. But in terms of the question here of the Messiah, the upshot of it is Mesih. And Mesih of its meanings is transmutation. Mesih. And Mesih can be like Mesih, the issue of transmutation, transmuted. And some say that's why he's the Messiah, the transmuted one. Of the meanings of Mes is the transmutation of his face. That his face turned, Mesih. Of the meanings of Mes is that his eye is what is closed over. Of the meanings of Mes, Yamsah al-Ard, that khalas, he steps upon every sit on the face of the earth, that Yamsah al-Ard. Okay? Like he's itinerant. There's the qirr fi makan. He's not in any single place. Look, like the Antichrist, he doesn't have a capital city. His age is the age of movement, where he moves from place to place in order to deviate people. That's the Antichrist. That's Mesih. That's the Messiah. And that latter meaning is, you say, is one of the same reasons why Jesus is called the Messiah. Of the Messiah, Jesus has no place. Jesus is an itinerant prophet. And if Jesus travels, one day he's in Palestine, next day you find him in Egypt. Jesus travels, wherever he lays his hat, that's his home. Jesus, son of Mary, alayhi. So that's why majority of the statements of Jesus, even in our tradition, you find him out there in the Bawadi, out there in the wilderness, Jesus, son of Mary, alayhi. So he's the Messiah from that perspective. Okay, although he doesn't travel the entire earth like the Antichrist, but he's still itinerant. But he's also the Messiah because Yamsah. Yamsah. And Yamsah means he anoints people. And Jesus is the anointer. And if he touches you, khalas, he heals you. He's the healer. That's what the meaning of the Messiah. But as it relates to Jesus, the son of Mary, alayhi salam. And some of them say that you don't call the Antichrist the Messiah, the Dajjal of the ulama. They prefer to call him the Messiah, which is the lugha, with the kha, which is the issue of Mesih, and the transmuter, and the one transmuted. Okay? That's the Antichrist. That's the meaning of Messiah, but there's a lot of indications linguistically. Should we move to, and Dajjal is the imposter, Yughati, the Mughati. How he covers over, okay, truth with falsehood. Sayyidina Hudayfa ibn Yaman, he said that so long as you know religion, you know deen, then you're able to tufarriq bayn al-haqq wal-batil, that you're able to distinguish between truth and falsehood. And so the Antichrist is going to capitalize upon ignorance, especially ignorance, meaning ignorance of the soul. You can have all the knowledge you want, but if the knowledge doesn't impact your reality, then khalas. What's the benefit? What's the benefit of knowledge? Okay, so he takes advantage of ignorance and yughati. So that Dajjal is the one who covers over truth with falsehood. Where literally in the Arabic language is when you take a camel who's diseased and then you cover over the camel. And you put tar over the camel in order to fool the actual buyer that the camel's of good health. But it's really ill, it really has an ailment, but the ailment is beyond sight. You can't see it. Okay? Heck with the Antichrist. But Allah Ta'ala alam, the Antichrist, he don't look like God. Does he? Allah Ta'ala look like that? Sure. Even for an Apophis, Adola, Abnar of Dhul Khawaisara, Antichrist is going to look like that with one eye and all of that. And that's what people lost their intellect. Lost their intellect, like the Imams of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum were wrong. See, in that day, on his final emergence, the majority of people have just lost their intellect. ذهبت العقول أكثر الناس. They say the majority of people have lost all sense, just like you believe this one-eyed creature is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Prophet ﷺ told us, just be certain, لا ترون ربكم. Look at this word, you will not see your Lord. Not bushra. They tell you you're going to see him. لا ترون ربكم حتى تموتوا. Until you die. And the seeing of the divine subhanahu wa ta'ala is next world reality. For those who survive the tribulations in and of itself. Should we move to the sacred places now? Yeah, I don't know. We definitely got to do something about our lives, and that is sort of really evident, because we live lives of heedlessness, and we do, and we live in places of heedlessness, and we're not doing anything about the heedlessness that surrounds us. We're illegitimate citizens according to many of the fuqaha, because in these lands, what makes us legitimate is the issue of doing something about the heedless state that you find people in. The issue of da'wah, with irshad, guiding people. That's what makes us legitimate in front of Allah Ta'ala. Otherwise we're illegal citizens. Hakada nuqbis. That's what the fuqaha themselves, radiallahu ta'ala anhum wardahum. But we have to do something about our state. We really do, And we have to encourage people to do something about their state. Because this is an emergency state, When the Dajjal Antichrist is doing his wickedness, what would Shaitan be doing? I'm going to crack a joke then, boy, What Shaitan be doing? The Dajjal's doing his bidding. What does Shaitan have to do in that age? When the bidding is now being done by the Antichrist himself. Okay? That's like the Prophet ﷺ to Ibn Sayyad. When the Prophet addressed Ibn Sayyad in Sahih Muslim, he said, ماذا ترى? He said, what is that you see? What is that you see? He says, Bahr. I see an ocean. An ocean. And the Prophet ﷺ says, Arsh Shaitan. And what he was seeing the throne of the devil. As the Prophet ﷺ informed us, that is over water. And many believe in the proximity of the island of the Antichrist. And many are going to locate the island of the Antichrist into what? Into the some put it at Bermuda, that's why some put it in the western lands inside of Bermuda. Some of them, as we took from some of our teachers, they put it at Florida, right there at the tip of Florida, in and of itself. Some of them put it. But it's just one of the islands. Hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, it shows you that it shifts. The Prophet ﷺ and the Hadith of Tamim al-Dari, the Prophet ﷺ's first words, that it's in Bahr al-Sham. Bahr al-Sham. Bahr al-Sham is like the Mediterranean. Okay? Hadith in Sahih Muslim, Mediterranean. So that it never went that far west. Okay? Then the Prophet ﷺ thereby said, Bahr Yemen. Look at the Rasul ﷺ, Bahr Yemen. Bahr Yemen, the Arabian Sea. On the islands in the Arabian Sea. Same hadith. Next word he says. Then the Prophet ﷺ says, Al-Mashriq, 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 the East, the East, the East, the East, the Prophet ﷺ says. And sort of what you get from that is like, shifting, the issue of him shifting islands, okay? And the maximum security, So in case somebody has ideas of going to Bermuda and finding them. Any questions, inshallah ta'ala? Any questions? No?
The concept of these three characters, again, the time, Isa al-Islam, and Antichrist, and the Mahdi. Two of these characters are in a state of the world that we can't see. Is the Imam, is he also in that phase at the moment, or is he not been born?
Who's in the world that we can't see? Sorry.
Isa is the most we can't see.
Okay, so Jesus is in the world of the unseen. Jesus is in the second heaven. That's Jesus.
Yeah. And then obviously Dajjal, he's, according to his own theory, he's 1,500 years old. He's obviously receiving. No, he's not 15, he's a lot older than that. The Dajjal. But the Dajjal is not in the world of the unseen. He's not? No, the Dajjal is in the world of the seen. If somebody, quote unquote, Allah Ta'ala granted the tawfiq, they could find them. Not that you should, but you could. Okay? And then the third one was whom? The Mahdi is not an issue of the unseen. The Mahdi is... As in the current state.
What do you mean by that?
Is he alive?
When you use the word, the question about is the Mahdi, the Imam al-Mahdi in the world of the unseen, when you use the world of the unseen, it means literally no matter how much you searched upon the face of the earth, you could never find him. Because he's not in the tangible realm. That's what world of unseen means. Okay, that's not the issue of the Mahdi. Okay, the Mahdi is not at any point inside of that type of world, the world of the unseen. But the Mahdi, the Mahdi is in the world of the Mahsus, the world of the tangible realm. Jesus, yes, the world of the unseen. And the Antichrist, no, he's not in the world of the unseen. And if people say it's cloudy enough, they could find him. And it's Tamim al-Dari found him. Okay? He found him. So, I mean, that tells us about it. No.
You know, after the Antichrist has entered every town and city, and he's gone to another town or city, what will the state of the people be? Will they be governed by some of the army of the Dajjal, or will they just be like zombies?
No, they are the army of the Antichrist.
No, when he's left that city, say he came to Bradford.
They're the army of the Antichrist. They believe in him as their Lord and Savior.
And they follow him everywhere?
Yeah. Not necessarily follow him everywhere, but now he's their Lord and Savior. That's their state. And that's why the Prophet said there are people from the believers who believe they're fortified, and they said, the Antichrist manifest, let's go and see what this is all about. And so they go to the Antichrist, and when they stand in his presence, khalas, and he just strips them of faith. Meaning, whoever faces off with them, then it's not going to be good. And that's the first meaning of Fawatih Surah Al-Kahf. At the beginning of Surah Al-Kahf, the boys of the cave, those 6 aristocrats and the 1 shepherd and the dog Raqim, they ain't facing off with anybody, any tyrannical person of misguidance. They have hit the hills, as they've said. And that's what we speak on. The age is the age where you just hit the hills. Okay? You don't face off with the Antichrist. Even the Mahdi himself doesn't face off with the Antichrist. That's telling you something. That Mahdi just stays inside of Jerusalem fortified. That's what the Mahdi does. Until the manifestation of Ibn Maryam alayhi salam. Okay?
The cities, will they have normal lives like they're doing now, work, college and all, or what state will they be in? That's what I mean.
Yani, Allahu A'lam. Allahu A'lam.
You mentioned that we should go to the hills as it is, but you also mentioned earlier that even a hamlet will be visited by the Dajjal. So, I mean...
So hamlet means like a small... Hamlet is like a small village.
A small village, yeah. So if people did go and create this village... Yeah.
No, we're not talking about creating villages. Okay. That's what we're speaking about. First and foremost, in terms of insihabat, of our removal, this is first and foremost spiritual. This is فَفِرُّوا إِلَى اللَّهِ. As Allah Ta'ala says in Dariyat, flee to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. إِنِّي ذَاهِبٌ إِلَى رَبِّي. Whether I am now moving towards my Lord, He's going to give me huda, guidance. So this is the first and foremost, that we have to flee to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala first and foremost. And then, khalas, you know where you can be physically protected. And you know that there are certain places, if you manifest at that point in time, then you're good. But we have a lot of warnings before that. Before you start speaking about that from a perspective, the Mahdi ma the Mahdi hasn't manifested as he. You get the point. And any questions, inshallah? Any questions now?
Would there be multiple Mahdis or just the one? Because there's many hadiths that mention about war and then good times. And so is the belief that there'll be multiple Mahdis and then the final Mahdi will then fight at the time of the Dajjal?
Yeah, we mentioned that before, issues of dress rehearsals. There are most people who claim to be the Mahdi, and there's the actual signs of them being the Mahdi, historically, from one perspective, could have held true, but it's not the Mahdi. So from that perspective, you can say from that, even the Hashimi himself, in the time of the Mahdi, who claims he had the sifat of the Mahdi. As we mentioned, that some say he's the cousin of the Mahdi himself. You have the sifat, but that's not the Mahdi. So this issue of, is there going to be multiple Mahdis before the final Mahdi? No. It's not the same phenomenon as the Antichrist. But there are multiple Antichrists who are projections of the one physical Antichrist that have happened. We just ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for tawfiq, inshallah, and protection. Month of Rajab, it's a blessed month. Remember, this is the month where you flee to Allah ta'ala. It's the month of the great return, the month of Tawbah, the month of Istighfar, the month of what? Of the Uruj of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam ila Rabbihi. قاب القوسين وأدنى صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. Inshallah, we just try to sort of expose ourselves to the winds of the moment, inshallah, tabarakallah, because that return back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if it's not already begun, it has to begin at some point in our life, inshallah, tabarakallah. And if it hasn't already begun, there's not a more blessed time for it to begin than now. Especially inside of a month where there's ta'yidat and faydanat coming from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah ta'ala assists the slaves inside of this month. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for assistance. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for protection. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for faith fortified. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us faith. In the age in which we live in, that faith is tainted with doubt. That faith is tainted with hypocrisy. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said that when you see the age where there are full start time, that there are two citadels, two camps of faith that is not tainted by hypocrisy and disbelief, that is not purified by faith, I just have an iota of faith. From that moment on, await the manifestation of the Antichrist on that day or the next day. Okay, so we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He makes us of those who, mashallah, tabarakallah, whose faith is fortified and purified and free from all types of impurities, and Allah ta'ala grants us securities. And so we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to raise us in degrees, subhanahu wa ta'ala, tawfiq wa nadar minhu, wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam.